Welcome here. My name is Tyson, and we are starting a new series titled Waiting for Christmas. And we're going to look at why Christmas is so important and why Jesus' birth changed everything. Now, I don't know about you, but I hate waiting. I get antsy. I start to fidget. I get anxious. And like when I'm texting one of my friends and I see the three little dots on the bottom as they're responding to my text, I want to know exactly what they're writing. And I want it now. Or when I'm driving, I don't like being behind slow drivers. So I switch lanes. And then I'm behind another slow driver and I switch back. And when I'm microwaving popcorn, I don't know about you, but I love to stare at the microwave, like right in front of the door, and you're listening to the popcorns pop, and you try to time it so that when it's like a little bit of time in between, you want to stop it so you can get that popcorn out and start eating it. It's a thing where I think we all hate waiting. Now, I remember the day that I proposed to my wife, Mary Tess. She was the youth leader at her church, and she was in charge of planning this epic youth event. Now, I'd gone behind her back and I'd arranged with her youth pastor to surprise her by crashing the event and asking her to marry me. Now, if you know my wife, Mary Tess, you would know that she is one of those like crazy planner types. Like when she was assigned homework as a kid, she would get it done the day it was assigned. Whereas like me, like I'm Captain Procrastinator. I'm scrambling to get it done the night before it's due. That's just how I roll. And you're probably like that too. But Mary Tess, she was always early. Like, she would consider herself being late somewhere if she was there 5 minutes early. For me, like that's a victory. If I'm 5 minutes early, that's a huge win. So the day I proposed, check this out, I had to make sure I got there before her so she didn't think anything was sus. So I got to her church about 6 hours early and set up camp by hiding in the church's baptismal tank. Like, what is that? It's really just like a glorified bathtub in a church. It's like this little 4x4 square box. Now, why did I hide in a baptismal? It was because it's the only room in the whole church where we knew she wouldn't go into while setting up for this event. So seriously, for 6 hours, I sat there waiting for the big moment when I was going to jump out and propose to her at this youth event. I'm not exaggerating when those 6 hours felt like a lifetime. I was so nervous. I was so excited. I was antsy in the waiting. My mind would play games with me. Like, I don't know if yours do when you're waiting, but I was thinking like, what if she says no? What if something goes wrong? What if she finds me in this baptismal tank and is like, what are you doing here? And it spoils the surprise. And so on and so on. And I was thinking these things for 6 hours. We've all had to wait for something. Whether it's our burrito in the microwave to finish heating up, whether it's a package that's supposed to arrive in the mail, or whether it's a test result to come back, or it could even be something bigger. We all wait. So feel free to discuss this question with a friend or trusted individual or family member. What is something you have waited a long time for? You know what makes waiting so tough? Waiting is so tough because we are expecting something and we want it to come right away. However, there are times when we have to wait in order to receive something good. Like, did you know that before Jesus was born, the people of Israel, God's people, waited 400 years for Jesus to be born? All they had to go off was like 300 prophecies, or another word for that is predictions about a coming Savior to the world. And when he comes, he will ultimately change everything. So 400 years they waited. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't even wait 7 seconds for an ad on YouTube to finish, let alone waiting 400 years. But when it happened, it changed the course of history. Galatians 4 verses 4-5 says this, "But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law so that we might receive adoptions as sons." Okay, think about this for a second. This is crazy. So for 400 years, a nation waited for the Savior. All they had to go on was these promises and a bunch of different predictions that were supposed to come true to give them a heads up on it. But when those promises and predictions came true, ultimately it was mind-blowing. The birth of this baby Jesus changed the course of history for not just Israel, but for all mankind. So here's the point. Sometimes God asks us to wait for something, and I've learned that the waiting is often worth it. Because, let's be honest, waiting can suck. Like, I hate waiting. It's hard to wait. And when God's people had to wait for Jesus to come, there were tears and there were frustrations. There were times when their minds would wonder if he had forgotten about them. Like, do you ever wonder or experience those things yourself? I know I do. But here's the great part. That God continued to remind them that he hadn't forgotten about them. And God hasn't forgotten about you. But not only is waiting tough, because sometimes waiting can be the best part. Like, I don't know about you, but I remember those times when I went on the bus ride to summer camp, or when you're boarding a plane for a vacation or a trip. They were sometimes the funnest parts of the trip. Because sometimes the journey is the best part, because you know that it's just the beginning of something great that's about to happen. And you're excited for what's on the other side of it. See, waiting for Jesus gave God's people hope because they knew God would fulfill his promises. In fact, God's people were known as being a people of hope in the times and the dark times that they were walking through in their waiting. So we, as believers in Jesus, can have the same hope as well, to know that God has got you and that he's got something great for you. So the last thing I wanted to say was this about waiting, is that waiting is ultimately necessary for growth. Think about it. There are all sorts of lessons for us that while we wait. We learn patience. We learn to trust. We learn to be content, and so much more develops within us while we're waiting. And sometimes God makes us wait for something because ultimately we're not ready for it yet. We have some more development yet to do. For example, like driving a car. I so badly wanted to drive a car when I was younger, but I wasn't ready for it until I turned the legal age to get a license. That's ultimately when I was ready for it. So my question for you is this. What does God have you waiting for, and what lessons does he want you to learn in the midst of the waiting? And that's what was so great about this Christmas story. Because you can see Jesus' birth ultimately was worth the wait for 400 years. However, we can also see that God's people had to be patient and trust in him in the waiting. So as we wait for Christmas, or as you wait for anything in your life, not just Christmas, remember that God has something for you in this. You might not see it now, and you might feel like it's like 6 minutes, or it might feel like 6 hours, or it might feel like 400 years. But whatever God has for you in the waiting, and on the other side of the waiting, it is worth the wait.